All right, a little more bias for you. This is one of my favorite topics in all of history, and I love this topic because it encapsulates so many themes of history, and we're really starting. I mean, honestly, we're starting 3,000 years ago, and we're coming all the way up to the modern day, probably to yesterday or today. Um, and what I'd like to do is I would be so happy and so proud if, by the time we make it through this week, you're recognizing some themes that we've already touched on, and you're saying, yes, I can see that at play in this little strip of land about the size of New Jersey. So that's what we're doing here this week. And so what we're doing is we're going to what used to be called Palestine or Canaan. And it is a teeny tiny strip along the Mediterranean coast. And the beauty here is that this land has been inhabited and has been sacred for thousands of years for so many people. I've never been there, and I would love to see this place. At the center of it all is the Temple Mount, where tradition says that Abraham almost sacrificed Isaac, or Ishmael if you're Muslim, where Muhammad ascended into heaven, where the Jews built one temple, got it knocked down, built another temple, got it knocked down. This is the same temple where Jesus came and threw the money changers off of the temple. So all of these religions converge on this one holy site. And the bummer is that it is one holy site, and they all disagree on who should control the space, who should be in the space, and all of this. And the other word here is diaspora that I have. And what happens is, this is important, is what happens after the destruction of the Second Temple. The Romans come in and they destroy the temple, and they scatter the Jews. The Jews, instead of being in this traditional homeland, instead now are all throughout Europe, all throughout the Middle East. And that's important because they're not there anymore. And of course, in their wake come in these nomadic Bedouins, the Palestinians. We have years and years of history. The Romans controlled the area for a long time, and then it passes along, and eventually it falls under the Grand Ottoman Empire. And the Ottoman Empire, of course, stretches for hundreds of years in this area, and there are no states. There's just the Ottoman Empire, and they're up in Istanbul, Constantinople. And what happens is you have these nomadic people who kind of, wander through the desert, and they live in this area, and they pray at this place, and everything's fine, but there are no boundaries. There are no states. And so what happens is that with the fall of the Ottoman Empire, after World War I, Britain and France split this region up, and they split it up with these superimposed boundaries, and they create these little states. And in the area that we're concerned with, the British people have control over it. And who's there? Well, we've got both nomadic Bedouins, the Palestinians, and then we have an increasing number of Jewish refugees. So back in the 1800s, before the First World War, a man named Theodor Herzl had actually said, look guys, he's up in Europe, he's Jewish, he says, look guys, this isn't going to get any better. They hate us, and they're always going to hate us. And what sparks this is this thing called the Dreyfus Affair, where a French soldier, a Jewish French soldier, is accused of espionage, and the facts of the trial have nothing to do, or the way the trial goes has nothing to do with the facts. It all has to go about whether or not he's Jewish, and that of course doesn't go well. So basically what happens is all of this turns into this idea of Zionism, or they're going to return to Zion. And Jews start coming. And they start coming from Europe, from all different places, and they're making their aliyah. They're going up. They're going to Zion. And so what's happening in the early 1900s, mid 1900s, even before World War II, is Jews are immigrating to Israel. They're setting up kibbutz. And here's the wacko thing. They have nationalism. They have loyalty to a state, to a place, to a national identity before they have a state. Palestinians don't even have a concept of a state. So they're not defending anything. They're not just saying you're coming into our state because they don't have a state. They've been under the Ottoman Empire for so long. And then, of course, we have the Holocaust. And what happens in the Holocaust is that, or in 1930s, 1940s, is you have this incredible wave of Jewish immigrants into Palestine, and you have a little bit of global guilt going on. So for the first time, the world is actually saying, okay, let's give the Jews a place to go. But don't think they're being nice about it. They're saying, let's give the Jews a place to go so they're not here anymore. That's what they're really saying. And so what basically happens, and you'll see this through your resources this week, is that this doesn't go well. We have Jews coming in and saying, this is our ancestral homeland, this is the land that God actually gave us in the opening books of the Bible. You have Palestinians saying, we've been here for centuries, for thousands of years. This is where we live. And by the way, you're Jewish, and we kind of don't like you guys. And so in 1948, what happens is the British Mandate ends, the Brits pull out, and the Jewish state is born. And the very next day, the Arab states and the Palestinians revolt, and it's called the War of Independence if you're Jewish. It's called Al-Nakba, or the catastrophe, if you are Palestinian. And this, of course, sets up years and years of Palestinian refugees where they've lived literally on these olive farms for generations, and now they're scattered throughout Syria, Jordan, and into Egypt. This goes on for a while. These guys have wars back and forth over the incoming decades. Some of these are Cold War wars, some of these are war wars. And then what happens is that the Palestinians begin to organize and begin to rise up through their intifadas. And they start doing things which are terrorist acts rather than acts of war, because in their minds all occupying Jews are the enemy. So there's no difference between the kid on the school bus and the soldier with a gun. And this is, of course, where they fail, and they start to lose a lot of sympathy. Jewish people believe that this whole strip of land is theirs. Some Jewish people believe that. And they start occupying areas that are Palestinian, which means they go in, they push the Palestinians out, and they build neighborhoods inside the lines that the UN has said, no, those areas are Palestinian. So now you have a problem, because now you have areas that you have Jewish enclaves inside Palestinian land. And the whole thing here, it revolves around a couple of issues. The settlements that I just talked about, the right of return. Should all of these Palestinians who are living in Syria, Jordan, Egypt, and beyond have the right to come back to Palestine? Well, if they do, the Palestine that's left's not big enough for them, for where do we put them? In Jerusalem. Who's going to get Jerusalem? Specifically the Temple Mount, which the exact same spot is holy for both of these people. So those are some of the things I want you to kind of look at and see how they connect to all of the other issues of history that we've had. And if you see this, basically this is the green part is what the UN says should be Palestine, but you can see there are actually Israeli areas inside the green line being what is, what originally was Palestine. I mean, what originally was Palestine after the UN came in. And now what the heck do you do with those areas in there? And if you look at the names of these places, these are the places of history. And of course the Gaza Strip is down kind of where that date is. So how do you connect the Palestinians that live in the Gaza Strip with the Palestinians that live in the West Bank? That's the other major problem. So great problems, and I'm sorry this was so long.